Commander Xylith's four eyes studied the datapad with growing curiosity. The Galactic Empire had sent recruitment notices to every known species in their territory, seeking skilled fighters for the upcoming campaign against the rebel systems. Most responses were predictable. The Krillian warrior clans offered their traditional blade masters. The Vorthak sent their cybernetically enhanced soldiers. The crystalline Nixari promised their energy-wielding combat specialists. But this application was different. It came from a species called humans, from a small blue planet in the Outer Rim territories. Xylith had barely heard of them before this moment. According to the file, humans had only made contact with galactic civilization 3 cycles ago. They were relatively new, technologically behind most Empire species, and lived on a single world with no significant military reputation. The human's name was Marcus Chen. His application was simple, almost crude compared to the elaborate presentations from other species. No genetic modifications were listed, no special abilities, no energy manipulation powers, just basic biological specifications and a request to serve as a combat specialist. Xylith's aide, a nervous Quillen named Frex, hovered nearby. "Commander, surely we should focus on the more established warrior races. This human seems quite ordinary." Xylith clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The Empire was desperate for soldiers. The rebel systems had been gaining ground and every fighter counted. Besides, there was something intriguing about this simple application. Why would such an unremarkable species volunteer for what was essentially a suicide mission against hardened rebels? Schedule an interview, Xylith decided. I want to meet this human personally. 3 days later, Marcus Chen stood in the commander's office aboard the Imperial recruitment station. Xylith was surprised by the human's appearance. Most warrior species were imposing, featuring natural weapons, thick armor-like skin, or enhanced musculature. Marcus looked almost fragile by comparison. He was average height, with soft, pale skin and strange fur only on the top of his head. His eyes were a peculiar blue color, and he wore simple clothing that offered no protection. "So, Marcus Chen of Earth," Xylith began, settling his massive frame behind his desk. "Tell me why your species believes it can contribute to our military efforts." Marcus remained standing straight, his voice calm and steady. "We understand you need fighters, Commander. Humans have been fighting for our entire recorded history. We know how to adapt, how to survive, and how to win when the odds are against us." Frex whispered loudly enough for Marcus to hear. "But your people have no special abilities, no natural weapons, no enhanced strength or speed." Marcus smiled, an expression that Xylith found oddly unsettling despite its apparent friendliness. "That's true. We don't have claws or energy beams or telepathic powers, but we have something else, which is," Xylith asked, "persistence, creativity, and a willingness to do whatever it takes to protect what we care about." Xylith studied the human for a long moment. There was something in those blue eyes, a depth that seemed to hint at hidden reserves. The commander had interviewed thousands of potential recruits over the years, and he had learned to read the subtle signs of true warriors. Despite Marcus's unremarkable appearance, something about him suggested competence. "Very well," Xylith announced. "We will accept your application. However, you will start at the lowest rank and must prove yourself through combat performance." Marcus nodded. "Understood, Commander. I won't disappoint you." As the human left the office, Frex chittered nervously. "Sir, are you certain about this? The human seems so ordinary. What if he fails in his first mission?" Xylith leaned back in his chair, still thinking about those unsettling blue eyes. "Then we will have lost one unremarkable soldier among thousands. But if my instincts are correct, we may have gained something valuable." The recruitment station buzzed with activity as new soldiers from across the Empire reported for duty. Marcus was assigned to Barrack 7 with other newly recruited fighters. His bunkmates included a towering Goric with natural bone spikes, a Plex warrior whose skin could deflect energy weapons, and a Zendari female who could phase through solid matter. They looked at Marcus with barely concealed amusement. To them, he appeared to be the weakest member of their squad by far. "Human," the Goric rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "Perhaps you should request assignment to support roles. Combat is dangerous for soft species like yours." Marcus was checking his standard-issue equipment, familiarizing himself with the Imperial weapons and armor. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm here to fight." The Plex warrior named Corv laughed. "With what? You have no natural weapons, no special abilities. What happens when you face real enemies?" "I guess we'll find out," Marcus replied, continuing his equipment inspection with methodical precision. That evening, the new recruits gathered in the station's training facility for initial combat assessments. Each species demonstrated their natural abilities for the instructors. The Goric showed how his bone spikes could pierce armor. The Plex deflected training blaster shots with his hardened skin. The Zendari phased through walls and struck targets from impossible angles. When Marcus's turn came, he simply requested standard training weapons and began running through basic combat drills. His movements were efficient but unremarkable. He fired weapons accurately, moved tactically, and showed solid hand-to-hand combat skills. Nothing spectacular, nothing that would distinguish him from any competent soldier. The instructor, a veteran Krillian named Vash, made notes on his datapad. Adequate performance. No special abilities noted. Recommend standard infantry assignment. Later that night, as the barracks settled into sleep cycles, Marcus lay in his bunk thinking about the days ahead. His fellow soldiers had dismissed him as weak and unremarkable. The instructor saw him as barely adequate. Even Commander Xylith seemed uncertain about his potential. They had no idea what humans were really capable of when pushed to their limits. They didn't understand the evolutionary pressures that had shaped his species, the countless generations of warfare and survival that had hardened humanity into something far more dangerous than their appearance suggested. Marcus smiled in the darkness. Soon enough, they would learn. The rebel systems would provide the perfect testing ground to show the Empire exactly what they had recruited when they invited a human to join their war. Marcus's first assignment came 2 weeks after completing basic training. Squad 7 was deployed to the Kepler Station, a mining facility on the edge of rebel-controlled space. Intelligence suggested that rebel forces were planning to capture the station and its valuable quantum crystals. Captain Vex, a seasoned Throlian commander with natural armor plating and forearms, briefed the mixed-species squad in the transport ship's cargo bay. This should be a simple defensive operation. The rebels are expected to send a small raiding force. Our job is to hold the station until reinforcements arrive. Marcus sat quietly among his squadmates, checking his weapon for the third time. The other soldiers had grown accustomed to his methodical habits over the past weeks. While they relied on their natural abilities, the human seemed to compensate through careful preparation and attention to detail. Corv, the Plex warrior, stretched his energy-resistant skin. "How many rebels are we expecting, Captain?" "Intelligence estimates between 20 and 30 fighters," Vex replied. "Standard rebel equipment. Nothing we cannot handle." The Zendari female, Nexa, flickered in and out of visibility as she tested her phasing ability. "Will we have heavy weapon support?" "Negative. This is a stealth operation. We maintain low profile until combat is unavoidable." Marcus raised his hand. "Captain, what about civilian evacuation protocols? How many station personnel will be present during the operation?" Vex looked mildly surprised by the question. Most fighters focused on enemy threats rather than civilian concerns. Approximately 200 miners and support staff. They will shelter in the central core during any fighting. "Understood, sir." 3 hours later, Squad 7 infiltrated Kepler Station through maintenance tunnels. The facility was a typical mining operation, with living quarters, processing centers, and excavation equipment spread across several interconnected domes. Marcus studied the layout carefully, memorizing exit routes and choke points. The rebels arrived exactly when intelligence predicted. Their ship docked at the main port while Squad 7 remained hidden in the processing center. Through their communications, Marcus could hear the rebel leader issuing orders in the common galactic language. "Standard smash and grab operation," the rebel commander announced to his forces. "Secure the quantum crystals, eliminate any resistance, and evacuate within 1 hour." Captain Vex signaled his squad to take positions. The plan was simple. Wait until the rebels committed to entering the facility, then strike at their most vulnerable moment. Marcus found himself assigned to cover the eastern corridor, a position that Vex probably considered safe since it was least likely to see action. The human didn't complain. He settled into a concealed position behind mining equipment and waited. The first phase of the battle went according to plan. Vex's squad engaged the main rebel force in the central processing area. The sound of energy weapons and combat echoed through the facility. Marcus maintained his position, watching his assigned corridor and monitoring communications. Everything changed when the rebels revealed they had brought more forces than intelligence suggested. A second squad of enemy fighters began moving through the eastern section, heading directly toward the civilian shelters. "Captain," Marcus reported over communications, "I have 12 rebel fighters moving toward the civilian areas. They're bypassing our main engagement zone." "Hold position, Marcus," Vex replied, his voice strained by combat. "We cannot spare anyone to assist you." Marcus watched the rebels advance through his scope. They moved confidently, assuming this section was undefended. Their leader was a massive Brutak warrior with natural weapon spikes covering his arms. Behind him came 11 others, various species but all well-armed and experienced. The human calculated quickly. 12 against 1. Enemies with superior natural abilities, no backup available. By any reasonable analysis, he should retreat and report the civilian areas as lost. Instead, Marcus smiled. The first rebel died without ever knowing what hit him. Marcus's shot took the rear guard in the head from 100 meters away. The sound of the weapon discharge echoed through the corridor, alerting the other 11 enemies to his presence. "Sniper in the eastern corridor," the Brutak leader roared. "Flank him!" But Marcus was already moving. He fired twice more while relocating, dropping another rebel and wounding a third. His shots were precise, calculated, and devastatingly effective. Each bullet found critical points that bypassed natural armor or energy shields. The rebels spread out, using their superior numbers to surround his last known position. They advanced carefully, expecting to find a defensive sniper nest. Instead, they found empty air. Marcus had relocated to the ventilation system above their heads. He watched through a grating as the confused enemies searched for him below. When the moment was right, he dropped a fragmentation grenade into their midst and immediately moved again. The explosion scattered the rebel squad and eliminated 3 more fighters. The survivors were now genuinely concerned. This was not the simple cleanup operation they had expected. "What kind of sniper are we dealing with?" one rebel called out. "Unknown species," another replied. "Tactics suggest advanced military training." Marcus struck again from a different angle, this time from ground level behind a stack of mining containers. 2 more precise shots eliminated the rebels' heavy weapons specialist and their communications officer. He was gone before they could return fire. The pattern continued for 20 minutes. Each time the rebels thought they had pinned down their attacker, Marcus appeared somewhere else. He used the environment to his advantage, turning mining equipment into cover and obstacles into weapons. A carefully placed shot caused a support beam to collapse, crushing 1 rebel. Another shot triggered a steam vent that blinded and burned 2 more enemies. By the time reinforcements arrived from Captain Vex's main engagement, only the Brutak leader remained alive. He sat against a wall bleeding from multiple wounds, staring in shock at the carnage surrounding him. 12 fighters, he muttered as Imperial soldiers secured the area. 12 experienced fighters, and he killed them all. "What kind of monster did you recruit?" Captain Vex found Marcus calmly reloading his weapon and checking his equipment for damage. The human showed no signs of excitement or stress from the engagement. "Report, soldier," Vex ordered. 12 enemy fighters neutralized, sir. Civilian areas secured. No friendly casualties." Marcus's voice was steady and professional. Vex looked around at the bodies scattered throughout the corridor. Each death had been precise and efficient. No wasted ammunition, no excessive force, just clinical elimination of threats. "How many rounds did you fire?" Marcus checked his ammunition counter. 17 rounds, sir. 3 grenades, 17 rounds, 12 dead enemies, several wounded. It was the kind of efficiency that most Imperial soldiers could only dream of achieving. "Good work, soldier," Vex said finally, though something in his voice suggested he was more disturbed than pleased by the human's performance. As Squad 7 prepared to evacuate the station, Marcus's teammates looked at him with new respect. The soft, unremarkable human had single-handedly eliminated an entire rebel squad while protecting civilians. It was impressive, certainly, but they assumed it was just good training and lucky circumstances. None of them realized that Marcus had actually been holding back, using only standard tactics and equipment. If they had seen what humans were really capable of when truly threatened, they might have been less comfortable sleeping in the same barracks. Back at Imperial headquarters, Commander Xyleth read the mission report with growing interest. The humans' performance had been remarkable but not unheard of. Many species could achieve similar results under the right circumstances. What intrigued Xylith was the efficiency. No wasted effort, no unnecessary risks, no emotional responses. Marcus Chen had approached the combat situation like a mathematical problem and solved it with minimal resources. The commander made a note in the humans file. Recommend advanced assignment. Shows exceptional tactical thinking and marksmanship skills. It was a positive evaluation, but still well within normal parameters for exceptional soldiers. Xylith had no idea that he had just witnessed the very edge of human capability, and that the real demonstrations were yet to come. 3 missions later, Marcus's reputation within Squad 7 had evolved from curiosity to grudging respect. His tactical abilities and marksmanship consistently exceeded expectations, though his squad mates attributed this to excellent training, rather than anything inherent to his species. The 4th mission changed everything. Captain Vex stood before his assembled squad in the briefing room aboard the Imperial cruiser Dominance. The holographic display showed a heavily fortified rebel stronghold on the planet Xerion Prime, built into a mountainous region that provided natural defensive advantages. "This is our most challenging assignment yet," Vex announced, his forearms gesturing at the tactical display. "The rebel base contains vital intelligence about their supply lines. Command wants that information, and they want the base neutralized." Corv studied the fortress layout with his enhanced visual systems. "Captain, those defensive positions look extremely well planned. Multiple overlapping fields of fire, energy barriers, and what appears to be at least 50 defenders." "Correct," Vex confirmed. "Intelligence suggests the base commander is Drac Moulton, a former Imperial officer who defected to the rebels 2 years ago. He knows our standard tactics." Nixa flickered in and out of visibility nervously. "Sir, my phasing abilities might allow infiltration, but I cannot handle 50 enemies alone." The Goric warrior Thane flexed his natural bone spikes. "A direct assault would be costly. We would need significant support." Marcus had been quietly studying the holographic display, his eyes tracking defensive positions and potential approach routes. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and analytical. "Captain, what's the timeline for this operation?" "We have a 12-hour window. Rebel reinforcements are expected after that." "And what about local environmental factors? Weather patterns, wildlife, geological features?" Vex looked puzzled by the unusual questions. Most soldiers focused on enemy positions and weapon placements. "The planet has severe electrical storms at night. Local fauna includes several predatory species. The terrain is mostly volcanic rock with limited vegetation." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Sir, I'd like to propose an alternative approach." "Go ahead, soldier." "Instead of a direct assault or infiltration, what if we made the defenders come to us? Force them to abandon their fortified positions and engage on ground of our choosing?" Corv snorted derisively. "How exactly would you accomplish that? Drac Moulton is too experienced to fall for basic deception." Marcus pointed to several locations on the holographic map. "The base depends on 3 external resources: water from this underground spring, power from these geothermal generators, and communication through that relay station." "What if all 3 systems began failing simultaneously?" Vex considered the proposal. "Even if we could sabotage those systems, the defenders would simply repair them." "Not if the sabotage appeared to be natural disasters rather than enemy action," Marcus replied. "Xerion Prime has severe seismic activity. If the defenders thought they were dealing with geological events, they would send repair teams to investigate. And then we eliminate the repair teams and continue escalating the apparent natural disasters until the base becomes untenable. Eventually, they will have to evacuate, and we can intercept them in the open terrain where our advantages outweigh theirs." The squad exchanged glances. It was an unusual strategy, more complex than typical Imperial tactics, but the logic was sound. "Very well," Vex decided. "We will attempt your approach, Marcus. But if it fails, we revert to standard assault protocols." The mission began at sunset. Marcus led the squad through the volcanic terrain surrounding the rebel base, moving carefully to avoid detection systems. His knowledge of stealth techniques impressed his teammates, who realized the human possessed skills beyond simple marksmanship. The first target was the water supply. Marcus analyzed the underground spring's location and identified a specific rock formation that, if damaged, would cause a natural landslide to block the water flow. He placed shaped charges with surgical precision, making the damage appear like a seismic event. When the explosion echoed across the mountains, It sounded exactly like the geological activity common to Xerion Prime. Within an hour, the rebel base sent a 4-person repair team to investigate the water shortage. Marcus tracked their movement through his scope, watching them approach the landslide site. Team leader to base, the rebel engineer reported over intercepted communications. Looks like a natural rockfall. We can clear it, but we need heavy excavation equipment. Marcus waited until the team had spread out to assess the damage, then struck. 4 silent shots eliminated the entire repair crew before they could report back. He moved the bodies into the landslide debris, making their disappearance appear accidental. Base to team leader, the rebel communication officer called repeatedly. Please respond. No answer came. Next, Marcus targeted the geothermal power generators. These were more challenging, requiring him to crawl through narrow volcanic vents to reach the critical components. His smaller human frame allowed access to spaces that would have been impossible for his larger teammates. He sabotaged the generators to create a cascading failure that would appear to be equipment malfunction rather than sabotage. When the base lost power 3 hours later, the defenders assumed they were experiencing technical difficulties. Another repair team was dispatched. This time, 6 rebels with heavy security escort. Marcus let them reach the generator facility before striking. The attack was swift and brutal. Marcus used the rocky terrain to his advantage, appearing from multiple positions to eliminate targets. His shots were precisely placed to disable rather than kill initially, creating wounded enemies who called for help and drew more defenders into the open. By the time the shooting stopped, 11 rebels were dead and the generator facility was completely destroyed. What the hell is happening out there? Drac Moulton's voice crackled over rebel communications. That's 2 teams we've lost. The final target was the communication relay. Marcus approached it alone while his squad mates provided distant overwatch. The relay station was heavily defended, with automated weapon systems and energy barriers. But Marcus had studied the defensive patterns for hours. He understood the automated system's programming and had identified a blind spot in their coverage. Moving with patience that impressed even the methodical Vex, Marcus infiltrated the relay station. Inside, he found 2 rebel technicians maintaining the equipment. They died before they could sound an alarm. Marcus then reprogrammed the communication system to broadcast false distress signals, making it appear that the relay was under attack by unknown forces. The deception worked perfectly. The rebel base erupted into chaos as defenders tried to respond to threats that seemed to be coming from all directions. Drac Moulton ordered a full evacuation, believing his position had been compromised by a major Imperial assault. As the rebels fled their mountain fortress, Squad 7 was waiting in the narrow canyon pass that provided the only viable escape route. The engagement was brief and decisive. Caught in the open terrain, the rebel force was systematically eliminated by superior positioning and Marcus's devastating sniper fire. Drac Moulton himself died trying to rally his remaining forces, struck down by a shot from nearly a kilometer away. When the battle ended, Captain Vex surveyed the results in disbelief. An entire rebel stronghold had been neutralized by a 6-person squad, with minimal Imperial casualties. The tactical intelligence they recovered was invaluable. Marcus, Vex called out as they prepared to evacuate. That was exceptional work. Where did you learn those infiltration techniques? Marcus was field stripping his weapon for cleaning, his expression as calm as ever. Basic military training, sir. Nothing special. But Vex was beginning to suspect that human basic training might be far more comprehensive than anyone had realized. The efficiency with which Marcus had dismantled an entire defensive operation was unlike anything the Throlian officer had witnessed in 20 years of military service. Back aboard the Dominance, word of the mission's success spread quickly through the ship's crew. A single squad had accomplished what should have required a full battalion assault. Other soldiers began looking at Marcus with new interest. The human's kill count was starting to accumulate, but more disturbing than the numbers was the clinical precision with which he operated. There was no rage, no excitement, no emotional response to combat. Marcus approached warfare like an engineer solving technical problems, and his solutions were becoming increasingly effective. Commander Xyleth reviewed the mission reports with growing unease. The human's performance continued to exceed all expectations, but something about the tactical approaches troubled him. The strategies Marcus employed seemed designed not just to win battles, but to completely demoralize and destroy enemy forces. Frex, he called to his aide, compile a complete record of human fighter Chen's combat engagements. I want detailed analysis of his tactics and kill ratios. Is there a problem, sir? Xylith stared at the mission reports, remembering those unsettling blue eyes from their first meeting. I'm beginning to think we may have underestimated what we invited into our military. The promotion came 3 weeks after the Xerion Prime operation. Marcus found himself assigned to Strike Force Delta, an elite unit composed of the Empire's most effective soldiers. His new commanding officer was Colonel Hax, a veteran Krillian whose reputation for tactical brilliance was matched only by his species' natural predatory instincts. Human, Colonel Hax addressed Marcus during their first briefing, his serpentine neck coiling slightly as he studied the new team member. Your record indicates exceptional performance, but this unit operates at a different level. Are you prepared for assignments that standard Imperial forces cannot handle? Marcus stood at attention, his blue eyes meeting the Colonel's predatory gaze without flinching. Yes, sir. I understand the requirements. Strike Force Delta consisted of 12 elite soldiers from various species. Each member had been selected for unique abilities that made them nearly unstoppable in combat. There was Vox, a Newthan whose natural electromagnetic manipulation could disable enemy technology. Sarah, a Helix warrior whose adaptive camouflage made her virtually invisible. Kren, a Vortaki whose enhanced reflexes allowed him to dodge energy weapons at close range. They looked at Marcus with polite skepticism. His human form appeared unremarkable compared to their obvious advantages, and his service record, while impressive, came from standard infantry operations rather than elite missions. Their first assignment together changed those perceptions permanently. The target was a rebel research facility on Malcor 7th, where intelligence suggested the development of new weapons technology that could threaten Imperial fleet operations. The facility was protected by advanced defense systems and staffed by enemy scientists who possessed critical knowledge that needed to be preserved. This is a precision operation, Colonel Hax explained to his assembled team. We need to neutralize all security forces, capture the research data, and take at least 3 scientists alive for interrogation. The facility has 47 defenders, including several enhanced warriors. Vox flickered with electromagnetic energy. Colonel, my abilities can disable their electronic systems, but the backup defenses are mechanical. Sarah can provide reconnaissance and eliminate sentries, Hax continued, while Kren leads the frontal assault with heavy weapon support. Marcus raised his hand. Sir, what about civilian researchers who aren't combat personnel? Standard protocol? Minimize civilian casualties when possible, but mission objectives take priority. Understood. May I suggest an alternative approach? The team exchanged glances. New members typically observed rather than proposed strategies on their first mission. Go ahead, Hax said. Marcus activated the holographic facility layout. The research data is stored in the central laboratory, accessible through multiple routes, instead of a single coordinated assault. What if we created a systematic psychological campaign to reduce defender effectiveness before we enter? Elaborate. The facility's security relies on predictable patrol patterns and communication protocols. If we begin eliminating defenders one by one, making each death appear to be equipment malfunction or accident, we can create panic and confusion that will make the final assault much easier. Sarah's adaptive camouflage flickered as she considered the proposal. That would require precise timing and extensive knowledge of their internal systems. I've studied the facility blueprints extensively, Marcus replied. I can predict patrol routes and identify vulnerability windows. Kren's enhanced reflexes caused him to tap rapidly on the table. How long would this psychological phase last? 6 hours. By dawn, I estimate we can reduce their effective force by 60% without them realizing they're under attack. Colonel Hax was intrigued. The approach was more sophisticated than typical Imperial tactics, requiring patience and precision rather than overwhelming force. We will attempt your strategy, Marcus, but you will take point on the infiltration phase. Can you handle that level of responsibility? Yes, sir. The mission began at midnight. Marcus approached the research facility alone, while his teammates established overwatch positions in the surrounding forest. The facility was a sprawling complex of laboratories and living quarters. surrounded by energy barriers and automated defense systems. Marcus spent 2 hours studying the defender patterns before making his first move. The initial target was a lone sentry patrolling the eastern perimeter. The guard was a Throlian, naturally armored and armed with advanced energy weapons. Marcus struck from a concealed position 300 meters away. The shot was precisely placed to penetrate the Throlian's armor at its weakest point. To observers, it would appear that the guard had suffered equipment malfunction, causing his power cell to explode. Patrol 7, report status. The facility's communication officer called an hour later. When no response came, they sent another guard to investigate. He found his colleague's body, apparently killed by defective equipment. The death was logged as an accident. Marcus repeated the pattern throughout the night. Each elimination was designed to appear as equipment failure, accident, or natural causes. A defender fell downstairs with a broken neck. Another apparently triggered his own explosive device. A third seemed to suffer from poison gas leak in his patrol area. By morning, the facility's security force had been reduced from 47 to 18, and the survivors were genuinely terrified. They had lost nearly 30 colleagues to apparent accidents and malfunctions, creating an atmosphere of paranoia and fear. Something is wrong here, the chief security officer reported to the facility commander. We cannot lose this many people to random accidents. Perhaps we should request evacuation support, another defender suggested. The psychological campaign had succeeded perfectly. When Strike Force Delta launched their final assault, they faced demoralized, confused defenders who were jumping at shadows and suspecting their own equipment. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. The remaining security forces, already psychologically broken, offered minimal resistance. Marcus personally eliminated 8 more defenders during the assault, bringing his total for the mission to 37 kills. But it was not just the numbers that disturbed his teammates. It was the methodical way Marcus approached each target, the clinical precision with which he calculated angles and timing, and the complete absence of emotional response to the violence. How many rounds did you fire during the entire operation? Colonel Hacks asked during the post-mission debrief. Marcus checked his ammunition inventory. 41 rounds, sir. 3 grenades. 2 improvised explosive devices, 41 rounds, 37 confirmed kills. Several wounded, multiple equipment sabotages. It was an efficiency rate that bordered on impossible. Sarah's camouflage had flickered constantly during their evacuation, a sign of stress among her species. Marcus, how did you predict the patrol pattern so accurately? Some of those shots were made through walls. I studied their communication protocols and behavioral patterns, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. Most species follow predictable routines under stress. Vox's electromagnetic field pulsed nervously. But some of those eliminations, how did you know exactly where to place charges for maximum psychological effect? Marcus looked at his teammate with those unsettling blue eyes. Experience. The word hung in the air like a threat. Experience with what? How much killing had this apparently young human already done to develop such sophisticated understanding of psychological warfare? Colonel Hacks found himself studying Marcus with new attention. The human's service record indicated only a few months of imperial military experience, but his tactical knowledge seemed to span decades. Where had he learned these techniques? Back at Imperial headquarters, Commander Xylith was reviewing casualty reports with growing alarm. Marcus Chen's kill count was now approaching 100 confirmed eliminations across multiple missions. More disturbing was the pattern of his engagements. The human didn't just defeat enemies. He systematically destroyed their ability to resist, their morale, and their will to fight. His tactics seemed designed to create maximum psychological impact on surviving forces. Frex, Xylith called to his aid. Access the cultural database for the human species. I want to understand their military history. Right away, sir. 20 minutes later, Frex returned with a datapad, his normally steady hands trembling slightly. Commander, you need to see this information. Xylith read the report with growing horror. Human history was an endless catalog of warfare, spanning thousands of years and involving weapons of unimaginable destructive power. They had developed military strategies of such ruthless efficiency that they had nearly destroyed their own species multiple times. Humans had perfected warfare to a degree that no other known species had approached. They studied combat with scientific precision, treating the elimination of enemies as a technical problem to be solved through innovation and adaptation. Sir, Frex whispered, according to this data, humans fought major wars involving millions of casualties. They developed weapons capable of destroying entire planets. Their military academies studied conflict theory as an advanced science. Xylith stared at the data in disbelief. The Empire had recruited a member of the most militarily advanced species in known galactic history, and they had assumed humans were primitive because they lacked natural weapons and special abilities. It was like inviting a predator into a herd of prey animals and being surprised when it started hunting. How many more humans have applied for military service? Xylith asked quietly. Frex checked his records. 12 more applications are currently under review, sir, and Earth has indicated they can provide additional volunteers if needed. Xylith felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. One human had already accumulated a kill count that terrified veteran soldiers. What would happen if the Empire recruited dozens or hundreds of these creatures? For the first time since sending that initial recruitment notice, Commander Xylith began to question whether inviting humans to join their military had been a wise decision. The emergency alert reached Strike Force Delta while they were still aboard the transport ship returning from Malcor 7. Colonel Hax's communicator blazed with urgent priority signals as he accessed the incoming intelligence briefing. All units, immediate deployment required. The message crackled with static. Rebel forces have launched a major assault on Tharsis Prime. The planetary capital is under siege. Estimated enemy strength, 800 combat troops with heavy armor support. Marcus looked up from cleaning his weapon. Sir, what's our mission objective? Colonel Hax studied the tactical display with growing concern. Strike Force Delta is being deployed to support the evacuation of Imperial government officials. Secondary objective, delay rebel advance until fleet reinforcements arrive. Sarah's camouflage flickered with agitation. Colonel, 800 enemies against our 12-person unit? Even with our abilities, those odds are extreme. The planetary defense force has already been overrun, Hax explained grimly. Their casualties were total. We're the only Imperial unit close enough to respond before the capital falls. Kren's enhanced reflexes caused him to drum his fingers rapidly against his armor. How long until fleet reinforcements arrive? 18 hours minimum. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. 18 hours against 800 enemy fighters was essentially a suicide mission. But Strike Force Delta had never refused an assignment, regardless of the odds. Marcus was studying the planetary layout with the same methodical attention he brought to all tactical situations. Colonel, what's the terrain like around the capital? Urban environment, high-rise buildings, underground transit systems, multiple civilian population centers. The rebels are using hover tanks and aerial assault units. Any restrictions on collateral damage? Hax looked at the human with slight surprise. Standard protocols apply. Minimize civilian casualties when possible, but mission success takes priority. Marcus nodded slowly. Sir, I'd like to request permission to operate independently during this mission. Explain. 12 soldiers working together can accomplish certain objectives, but we would be easily overwhelmed by superior numbers. However, a single operator working alone with proper support can create chaos that multiplies our effective strength. Vox's electromagnetic field pulsed uncertainly. Marcus, you're talking about engaging 800 enemies essentially by yourself. Not engaging them, Marcus corrected. Hunting them. The word sent an uncomfortable chill through the assembled team members. There was something in the human's tone that suggested this was not bravado or desperation, but a calculated tactical assessment. Colonel Hax considered the proposal. Conventional tactics would certainly fail against such overwhelming odds. Perhaps unconventional approaches offered their only chance of success. What would you need? Access to the city's infrastructure systems. Underground tunnels, building blueprints, utility networks, plus standard demolition supplies and extended ammunition reserves. And the rest of the team? Establish defensive positions around the government evacuation zones. Create noise and visible presence to draw enemy attention. Make them think they're facing a larger force than they actually are. Hax made his decision. Very well. You have 18 hours to delay 800 rebel fighters. Try to survive long enough for extraction. Understood, sir. 2 hours later, Marcus was moving alone through the underground maintenance tunnels beneath Tharsis Prime's capital city. Above him, rebel forces were advancing through the streets. systematically clearing buildings and eliminating any remaining Imperial presence. Marcus had spent the transport time studying city blueprints and analyzing the rebel attack patterns. Unlike his previous missions, this operation would require him to fully unleash the tactical capabilities that humans had developed through millennia of warfare. The rebel forces were organized into company-sized units of approximately 40 fighters each, supported by heavy weapons and armored vehicles. They moved confidently, believing they faced only scattered resistance from broken defense forces. Marcus began his campaign by targeting their communications infrastructure. Using the underground tunnel system, he accessed the city's central communication hub and reprogrammed it to create false reports and conflicting orders. Soon, rebel units were receiving contradictory instructions that sent them to wrong locations or caused them to fire on each other. The first direct engagement came when Marcus encountered a rebel patrol investigating unusual communication problems. 5 enemy fighters entered the maintenance facility, expecting to find technical equipment failures. Instead, they found death. Marcus struck from concealment, using the industrial environment to his advantage. Steam pipes became weapons when ruptured at precise moments. Electrical systems turned into traps when rewired correctly. The 5 rebels died without ever seeing their attacker, but this was only the beginning. Over the next 6 hours, Marcus systematically dismantled the rebel assault force using tactics that no other species had ever conceived. He turned the city itself into a weapon, using every system and structure to multiply his killing power. Explosives placed in sewer systems created sinkholes that swallowed entire enemy squads. Reprogrammed traffic control systems sent rebel vehicles into carefully prepared ambush zones. Modified building environmental controls created toxic gas clouds in occupied structures. The rebels began to panic as their organized advance degenerated into chaos. Units reported constant casualties from unknown sources. Equipment malfunctioned in impossible ways. The very city seemed to be fighting against them. "Command, this is Alpha Company," one rebel officer reported over intercepted communications. "We've lost contact with 12 units. Something is systematically eliminating our forces." Beta Company confirms multiple casualties from unexplained explosions and equipment failures, another voice added. Marcus monitored their communications while preparing his next phase of operations. The rebels were beginning to bunch together for mutual protection, abandoning their dispersed advance in favor of concentrated defensive positions. This was exactly what he had wanted. When large groups of enemies gathered in predictable locations, they became vulnerable to area effect weapons. Marcus had spent hours placing demolition charges in key structural points throughout the city. Now he began triggering them in sequence. The first explosion brought down a residential tower that had been occupied by 60 rebel fighters. The building collapsed precisely, pancaking the floors and crushing everyone inside while leaving adjacent structures undamaged. The second explosion was an underground gas main that erupted beneath a rebel command post. 43 enemy fighters died instantly in the resulting fireball. The third explosion triggered a cascade failure in the city's water system, flooding the underground tunnels where another rebel company had taken shelter. Those who didn't drown were picked off by Marcus as they tried to escape. By hour 12, the rebel force had been reduced from 800 fighters to fewer than 300. More importantly, the survivors were completely demoralized and terrified. They had been fighting an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't defend against. "This isn't a military operation," one rebel commander transmitted in desperation. "We're being hunted by some kind of monster." Marcus heard the transmission and smiled. Fear was a weapon more powerful than any explosive, and he was a master of its application. The final phase began as rebel forces attempted to retreat from the city. Marcus had anticipated this possibility and prepared accordingly. Every exit route was mined, every escape path compromised. As the demoralized enemy tried to flee, they walked into carefully constructed kill zones. The rebels trapped in the northern plaza found themselves under sniper fire from multiple directions. Though only one shooter was actually present, Marcus used mirrors and carefully positioned reflective surfaces to create the illusion of multiple attackers while maintaining a single firing position. The group fleeing through the industrial district triggered a series of explosions that brought down factory buildings in sequence, crushing escaping vehicles and creating impassable debris fields. Those who tried to escape through the underground transit system found that the tunnels had been flooded with toxic gas, turning their shelter into a death trap. When fleet reinforcements finally arrived 18 hours later, they found the capital city secure. Of the 800 rebel fighters who had begun the assault, fewer than 50 survived, and most of those were wounded and psychologically broken. Colonel Hax and Strike Force Delta had spent the 18 hours in continuous combat, defending the evacuation zones against sporadic rebel probes. They had eliminated perhaps 20 enemy fighters and successfully protected the government officials. Marcus had eliminated over 700. "Report," Colonel Hax requested when Marcus emerged from the tunnel system, still carrying his weapons and looking completely unharmed. "Mission accomplished, sir. Capital secured, rebel forces neutralized, government officials evacuated safely." Hax stared at the human in disbelief. "How many casualties did you inflict?" Marcus consulted his tactical notes. 743 confirmed eliminations. Approximately 30 wounded. 8 escaped. 743. The number seemed impossible. Even the most elite warriors from the most aggressive species rarely achieved double-digit kill counts in major engagements. "What about ammunition expenditure?" 267 rounds fired. 43 explosive devices deployed. Extensive use of environmental weapons and infrastructure modifications. Marcus had killed nearly 3 enemies for every round he had fired, while simultaneously conducting complex demolition operations and psychological warfare campaigns. The other members of Strike Force Delta looked at their human teammate with expressions ranging from awe to terror. They had always known Marcus was skilled, but this performance transcended normal military capability. Sarah's camouflage was completely unstable, flickering constantly as her stress responses overwhelmed her natural abilities. "Marcus, how is this possible? How can one person eliminate that many enemies?" Marcus looked at her with those calm blue eyes that had become increasingly unsettling to his alien colleagues. "Humans have been practicing warfare for a very long time. We've had lots of opportunity to perfect our techniques." Back on the fleet command ship, emergency meetings were being held at the highest levels of Imperial command. The battle reports from Tharsis Prime were so extraordinary that they required verification from multiple sources. Commander Xylith found himself summoned to explain how his recruitment decision had resulted in placing what appeared to be the most lethal individual warrior in galactic history within the Imperial military structure. "Sir," Xylith addressed Admiral Korath, the Supreme Commander of Imperial forces, "I believe we may have made a significant error in our assessment of human military capabilities." "Explain." "Our initial evaluation assumed that humans were primitive because they lacked natural weapons and special abilities. We failed to consider that their species might have compensated for these limitations by developing warfare techniques far beyond anything achieved by other civilizations." Admiral Korath reviewed the tactical reports with growing unease. The level of destruction one human had accomplished was beyond anything in recorded galactic military history. "How many more humans have we recruited?" 12 are currently in training, sir. Earth has offered to provide additional volunteers as needed." The Admiral felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. If one human could eliminate 800 enemy fighters, what would happen if they recruited hundreds of these creatures? For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Korath began to question whether the Empire had made a terrible mistake in inviting humans to join their war against the rebels. The debriefing room aboard, the Imperial flagship, was silent except for the soft hum of recording equipment. Admiral Korath sat across from Marcus, flanked by intelligence analysts and military psychologists from various species. Colonel Hax and the remaining members of Strike Force Delta observed from behind reinforced transparent barriers. Admiral Korath's multiple arms moved restlessly as he reviewed the data pads containing Marcus's mission reports. The numbers were undeniable, verified by multiple sources and supported by physical evidence from the battlefield. 743 confirmed eliminations in 18 hours by a single individual. "Human fighter Chen," the Admiral began, his voice carefully controlled, "your performance on Tharsis Prime represents the highest individual combat achievement in recorded galactic military history." Marcus sat at attention, his expression calm and professional. "Thank you, sir." "That was not intended as praise," Admiral Korath clarified sharply. "It was a statement of concern. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Behind the barriers, Marcus's teammates shifted nervously. None of them had slept well since Tharsis Prime. The knowledge that they had been fighting alongside what appeared to be the most lethal being in known space was deeply disturbing. Dr. Velth, an Nexari psychologist whose crystalline form pulsed with analytical energy, leaned forward. Marcus, during your 18-hour engagement, did you experience any emotional responses to the violence? Fear, excitement, guilt, satisfaction? I remained focused on mission objectives, Marcus replied evenly. That is not what I asked. Did you feel anything while killing 743 intelligent beings? Marcus considered the question for a moment. I felt efficient. The word hung in the air like a physical presence, efficient. Not victorious, not relieved, not traumatized. Efficient. Colonel Hax's serpentine neck coiled tighter as he spoke from behind the barrier. Admiral, with respect, I believe we need to address the broader implications of this situation. Go ahead, Colonel. Marcus has been with Imperial forces for only 4 months. His total confirmed kill count now exceeds 1,000 enemy fighters. More concerning is the escalating sophistication of his tactics. Each mission demonstrates capabilities that seem to exceed the previous engagement. Admiral Korath consulted his datapad. According to these reports, you first displayed exceptional marksmanship, then advanced infiltration skills, followed by psychological warfare techniques, and finally full-spectrum urban combat mastery. Where did you acquire such diverse training? Marcus looked directly at the Admiral. Standard human military education, sir. Standard education produces capabilities of this magnitude? For humans, yes, sir. Dr. Velth's crystalline form flickered with agitation. Marcus, I have reviewed historical databases for your species. Humans have engaged in large-scale warfare for most of your recorded history. Is this accurate? Yes. And these conflicts involved millions of casualties across multiple theaters of operation? Frequently. Your species developed weapons capable of destroying entire planets? Marcus paused, seeming to consider how much information to share. Several types, actually. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Intelligence analyst Crix of Orthak with enhanced cognitive processing spoke urgently into his communicator. Command. We need immediate access to complete human military historical records. Priority Alpha classification. Admiral Korath raised his arms for silence. Marcus, why did Earth not mention these capabilities when applying for military recruitment? You asked for soldiers, sir. We provided soldiers. But you failed to mention that human soldiers possess capabilities far exceeding any other known species. Marcus tilted his head slightly, as if confused by the complaint. Admiral, did any other species provide detailed capability assessments with their applications? The Krillians didn't mention the psychological effects of their natural weapons. The Vorthak didn't describe their cybernetic enhancement procedures. Why would humans be required to provide more information than other applicants? The logic was unassailable, which made it even more disturbing. The Empire had recruited humans using the same casual process they applied to all species, never suspecting that some civilizations might have developed warfare to levels that transcended normal military understanding. Commander Xylith, who had been silent throughout the debriefing, finally spoke. Marcus, when you first applied for Imperial service, did you consider yourself particularly skilled compared to other humans? No, sir. I have standard training and average aptitude by human measures. Average aptitude? I was ranked approximately middle of my class in military academy. Many of my instructors considered me unremarkable. The implications of this statement struck the room like a physical blow. If Marcus represented average human military capability, what would elite human soldiers be capable of? Dr. Velth's crystalline form pulsed rapidly with stress patterns. Admiral, I recommend immediate psychological evaluation of all human personnel. We need to understand if this individual represents normal human responses to violence or if we are dealing with an anomaly. Agreed. Marcus, you are confined to quarters pending comprehensive evaluation. Understood, sir. As Marcus was escorted from the debriefing room, the remaining officers exchanged nervous glances. Behind the barriers, Strike Force Delta members struggled to process what they had learned. Sarah's camouflage was completely unstable, flickering between visibility and transparency. Colonel, have we been fighting alongside a monster? I don't know, Hax replied honestly, but I'm beginning to understand why the human homeworld has only one sentient species. The psychological evaluation began immediately. Dr. Velth and a team of specialists from multiple species subjected Marcus to extensive testing using advanced scanning equipment and interrogation techniques. The results were even more disturbing than his combat performance. "Admiral," Dr. Velth reported in the secure briefing room, "the human shows no signs of mental illness, trauma, or abnormal psychology. His responses to violence are completely within normal parameters for his species." Explain. Humans appear to have evolved psychological mechanisms that allow them to engage in extreme violence without experiencing the emotional trauma that would incapacitate other species. They can compartmentalize killing behaviors and maintain functional social relationships simultaneously. Intelligence analyst Crix consulted his datapad with trembling manipulator appendages. "Sir, I have received the complete human military historical database. The information is unprecedented. Summarize. Human military history spans over 5,000 years of continuous warfare. They have developed strategic thinking, tactical innovation, and weapons technology far beyond any other known species. Their largest conflicts involved casualties in the tens of millions. They created weapons of such destructive power that they could have rendered their own planet uninhabitable." Admiral Korath felt his exoskeleton chill with realization. What prevented them from destroying themselves? They developed strategic doctrines to control their own destructive capabilities. Humans are not just efficient killers, Admiral. They are intelligent enough to understand the consequences of their own lethality. The briefing room fell silent as the full implications became clear. The Empire had not simply recruited skilled soldiers. They had invited members of the most militarily advanced species in galactic history to join their armed forces. "How many humans are currently in Imperial service?" Admiral Korath asked quietly. 13, including Marcus, but Earth has indicated they can provide thousands more if needed." "And how many humans live on their homeworld?" Crix checked his data. "Approximately 8 billion, sir. 8 billion members of a species that considered Marcus's capabilities to be unremarkable." The number was staggering. Commander Xylith spoke into the silence. "Admiral, we need to make a decision about the human recruitment program. Do we continue accepting their soldiers, or do we consider them too dangerous for integration into Imperial forces?" "Too dangerous for integration?" Admiral Korath repeated slowly. "Commander, we are currently at war with rebel forces that threaten the stability of our entire civilization. The humans have provided us with the most effective combat assets we have ever possessed." "But sir," Dr. Velth interjected, "what happens after the war? What do we do with soldiers whose natural capabilities exceed our ability to control or predict?" The question hung in the air without answer. The Empire had invited humans to help them win a war, but no one had considered what would happen when that war ended. In his quarters, Marcus sat quietly reading technical manuals about Imperial fleet operations. He was unaware of the debates raging throughout the command structure about his future. To him, this was simply another assignment in service to his new civilization. But deep in the ship's communication center, encrypted messages were being transmitted back to Earth. The human government was receiving detailed reports about Marcus's performance and the Empire's growing unease about human capabilities. On Earth, military planners reviewed these reports with satisfaction. Marcus was performing exactly as expected, demonstrating human military effectiveness while maintaining plausible deniability about the true extent of humanity's capabilities. The Empire had invited one human to join their war. They had no idea that they had actually invited an entire species that had been preparing for galactic warfare since long before first contact. Soon, they would begin to understand the difference between recruiting soldiers and awakening predators. 6 months after the Tharsis Prime incident, the war against the rebel systems had effectively ended, not through negotiated surrender or gradual territorial conquest, but through complete collapse of rebel military capability. The 13 humans serving in various Imperial units had systematically dismantled resistance forces with an efficiency that left enemy commanders paralyzed with fear. Admiral Korath stood in his private office aboard the flagship, reviewing the final casualty reports. The numbers were staggering, but not in the way he had originally expected when the war began. Imperial losses, fewer than 3,000 casualties across all theaters of operation. Rebel losses. Complete destruction of all military assets, with casualty estimates exceeding 200,000 fighters. The 13 humans had collectively achieved kill counts that redefined military possibility. Marcus Chen led with over 4,000 confirmed eliminations, but even the least effective human soldier had accumulated more than 1,000 enemy deaths. But the true measure of human impact wasn't in the numbers. It was in what had happened to enemy morale. Entire rebel fleets had surrendered rather than face Imperial forces known to include human fighters. The mere rumor of human presence in a battle zone caused mass desertions from rebel ranks. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Admiral Korath accepted the transmission and found himself looking at Ambassador Sarah Rodriguez, Earth's diplomatic representative to the Galactic Empire. "Admiral," Ambassador Rodriguez said with a pleasant smile, "I understand the war has concluded successfully. On behalf of humanity, I want to express our satisfaction with this cooperation between our species." "Ambassador, I believe we need to discuss the future of human military personnel in Imperial service. Of course, Earth is prepared to expand our contribution significantly. We can provide up to 50,000 military advisors if the Empire requires additional security assistance." Admiral Korath felt his exoskeleton grow cold. 50,000. 50,000 individuals with capabilities equivalent to Marcus Chen. The number represented more destructive potential than the Empire's entire existing military structure. "Ambassador, recent events have raised concerns about the integration of human soldiers into our forces. Their effectiveness has been unprecedented." Ambassador Rodriguez's smile remained constant, but something in her eyes suggested she understood exactly what the Admiral was really saying. "Are you expressing dissatisfaction with human performance?" "Not dissatisfaction. Concern about capabilities that exceed our initial expectations." "Admiral, humans pride themselves on exceeding expectations. It's one of our defining characteristics as a species." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert signal. Admiral Korath's communication officer appeared on a secondary screen. "Sir, we have an emergency situation. Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching from the Andromeda region. Unknown configuration, but preliminary analysis suggests highly advanced technology." Admiral Korath felt his worst fears materializing. "How many ships?" "Over 10,000 vessels, sir. They appear to be maintaining aggressive formation patterns." Ambassador Rodriguez leaned forward with interest. "Admiral, this sounds like the invasion force that our deep space monitoring stations detected several months ago. We've been tracking their approach vector." "You knew about this threat?" "Earth's intelligence services monitor various potential threats to galactic stability. We estimate this fleet represents an extragalactic species with hostile intentions toward all current civilizations." The implication struck Admiral Korath like a physical blow. Earth had known about an approaching invasion fleet, but had not informed the Empire until human military personnel were already integrated into Imperial forces. "Ambassador, why was this information not shared earlier?" "You never asked," she replied with that same pleasant smile. "Your recruitment notice requested soldiers to fight rebel systems. You didn't mention defending against extragalactic invasion." Admiral Korath realized that Earth had been playing a much longer game than anyone in the Empire had suspected. Humans hadn't simply responded to a recruitment opportunity. They had engineered their own integration into Imperial military structure in preparation for a threat they had known was coming. "What do you recommend, Ambassador?" "Accept our offer of 50,000 military advisors. Based on our analysis, you're going to need them." Over the following weeks, the true extent of human strategic planning became apparent. The 50,000 military advisors arrived aboard ships that displayed technology decades ahead of anything the Empire possessed. These were not desperate refugees seeking protection, but representatives of a military civilization that had been preparing for galactic warfare for generations. Marcus Chen was promoted to Strategic Planning Liaison, working directly with Imperial Command to coordinate defensive preparations. His calm demeanor remained unchanged, but Admiral Korath now understood that he was dealing with a representative of a species that thought in terms of millennia rather than battle cycles. "Marcus," Admiral Korath asked during a private briefing, "how long has humanity been planning for this invasion?" "Since our first deep space telescopes detected unusual energy signatures from the Andromeda region, approximately 150 years ago." And you've been preparing for galactic war for over a century? Preparation is a fundamental aspect of human strategic thinking, sir. We prefer to be ready for conflicts before they begin. Admiral Korath studied the human's calm blue eyes and realized he was looking at the product of a civilization that had turned warfare into an art form over thousands of years, then focused that expertise on preparing for threats that other species couldn't even imagine. What are humanity's true military capabilities? Marcus smiled, the same unsettling expression that had made his alien colleagues uncomfortable from their first meeting. Admiral, what you've seen so far represents our light infantry capabilities. The 13 humans currently in Imperial service are equivalent to what my species would consider basic soldiers. Basic soldiers? We have specialized units that are considerably more effective. The invasion fleet arrived 3 months later. The extragalactic species called themselves the Devourers, and their reputation for consuming entire civilizations was well earned. They possessed technology that seemed almost magical compared to standard galactic weapons. The first battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, over 800 Devourer ships had been eliminated with 0 Imperial casualties. The human military advisors had introduced concepts that revolutionized space warfare, coordinated fleet maneuvers that treated entire star systems as tactical units, weapons targeting strategies that turned enemy technology against itself, psychological warfare campaigns that caused enemy commanders to make fatal tactical errors. Marcus Chen personally commanded a small task force that eliminated the Devourer flagship using a strategy so complex that Imperial tactical computers couldn't model it successfully. The second battle lasted 3 hours. The third lasted 47 minutes. By the end of the first month, the Devourer invasion fleet had been completely destroyed. Not defeated or driven back, but eliminated so thoroughly that no evidence of their technology remained for study. The galactic community's response to human military effectiveness had evolved from curiosity, to respect, to fear, to genuine terror. The species that had seemed primitive and unremarkable had revealed themselves to be the most militarily advanced civilization in known space. Ambassador Rodriguez found herself meeting with representatives from dozens of species, all seeking to establish formal alliance treaties with humanity. The same governments that had initially dismissed Earth as an insignificant backwater world now competed desperately for human favor. "Admiral," she said during a final meeting with Imperial Command, "Earth appreciates the opportunity to demonstrate our capabilities in service to galactic civilization." Admiral Korath no longer bothered hiding his unease. "Ambassador, humanity has fundamentally altered the balance of power in this region of space. What are your species' long-term intentions?" "The same as always, Admiral. We want to survive and protect those we care about. Humanity has learned that the best way to ensure peace is to be prepared for war. And if other species find your capabilities threatening..." Ambassador Rodriguez's smile became genuinely warm for the first time. "Admiral, any species intelligent enough to develop space travel should be smart, enough to understand the value of having humanity as an ally rather than an enemy." The conversation ended with an unspoken understanding that had reshaped galactic politics. The Empire had invited humans to join their military, expecting to gain competent soldiers. Instead, they had awakened a species that redefined what military power could accomplish. Humanity's reputation spread throughout known space, not as conquerors or aggressors, but as the civilization you definitely wanted on your side when the universe became dangerous. Marcus Chen returned to Earth with full Imperial honors and a recommendation for advanced tactical training. His final kill count exceeded 6,000 confirmed eliminations across multiple theaters of operation. But more importantly, he had successfully demonstrated human military capability to a galactic audience that would never again underestimate his species. On Earth, military academies added new courses studying the psychological and strategic lessons learned from humanity's introduction to galactic warfare. The invasion that was intended to test human readiness had instead provided a perfect opportunity to establish humanity as the preeminent military power in known space. The Empire had sent out recruitment notices seeking soldiers to fight their wars. They had received something far more valuable, an alliance with the species that other civilizations would spend centuries trying to understand and emulate. In the end, the most terrifying thing about humans wasn't their kill counts or tactical brilliance. It was their ability to appear ordinary and unremarkable, right up until the moment they demonstrated exactly why their species had survived long enough to reach the stars. The universe had learned a valuable lesson. Never invite a predator species to demonstrate their capabilities, unless you're prepared to live with the consequences of that invitation.